Tonight, and joining us in studio is a very special guest, Gabe Hoffman. He's a hedge fund manager, a philanthropist. He's the owner of Esponda. Is that the correct pronunciation? Esponda Productions? Okay, good. And we're going to talk to him today, and he's in studio here at InfoWars because of a very important documentary that hasn't really gotten much exposure. And it's kind of interesting when you contrast his documentary to a previous documentary done by the same director. Now, back in 2006, Amy Berg directed a film called, let's see, what's the name of this? Deliver Us from Evil. And that was widely acclaimed because it exposed pedophilia in the Catholic Church. She got an Oscar nomination for that. And then in 2014, Gabe produced a film with the same director, the same subject, the same crime, pedophilia, except this time it was about Hollywood. And they had problems getting distribution in Hollywood, because if you want to talk about crimes of the Catholic Church, that's one thing. You want to talk about the pedophilia of Hollywood, that's a completely different story. No. We're not interested in talking about that. So joining us now is Gabe Hoffman. In 2000, he was at the age of 22. Gabe Hoffman was the youngest hedge fund manager on Wall Street while employed by Welch Capital Partners, a New York-based money manager. So that's how he made his money, and then he got into producing films. How did that happen, Gabe?
Well, it was really funny. We didn't come out to make a film at all. I'm a research-based guy. I deal with the facts. And we just decided, we got the pitch from my friend Matt Valentinas, our co-producer. We went to school together, and he told me, look, I've worked in Hollywood for 15 years. I know that Hollywood has a big, big pedophile problem. I said, look, I'm not a filmmaker, but philanthropy, hey, doing good for society, I could be convinced. So we cut a small check just for all the research with the film company, Amy's Disarming Films. We hired private investigators, the whole 9 yards. It took months and months, and I got binders full of information about convicted Hollywood pedophiles, in some cases still working in the industry.
Wow.
It's what you see in an open secret is less than 5% of the credible information that we got.
Wow.
So when I got all that stuff, I said, gosh, I lived a nice, normal childhood. I'm thankful for it. I've done well in life. Writing that check was one of the easiest things I've ever done.
Yeah, that's great. You know, that's interesting. You didn't get into this because you wanted to be a big-time Hollywood producer like, let's say, Harvey Weinstein, who wanted all the perks of Hollywood. You didn't get into it because of that. Instead, you wanted to do some good. Well, and we've seen that from other people. And as soon as you get into it and you say, I'm going to take a look at pedophilia, they come after you. They shut down your funding. They do anything they can to. Did you have? I'm sure you had some opposition to that, some harassment from that before even the film was completed.
Yeah, it's not really a great pickup line with, you know, girls to say that you're a Hollywood producer and then get asked for what, and you have to tell them what you made the film about. but yeah, to your point, I was lucky that we didn't have to rely on anybody else for funding. Once that research happened, and once we got that information, the camera started rolling. I was supposed to be just the anonymous financial backer. I don't do TV. I'm not a film guy. I'm an anonymous hedge fund guy. And by the way, I'd like to give a shout out to my big government overlords, the SEC, that I'm not here marketing my fund. In case you're watching, kiss, kiss, I am compliant with all of your rules and regulations. My fund is closed. We are not taking in any new investors. And you know that because like every other hedge fund out there, you sent people who camped out at our offices for a week just last year. And we were totally clean as we've always been.
That's the way they get people, getting down into the minutia of the regulations. And I think that's one of the things, you know, we look at what's going on with the ever-expanding ever-expanding investigation of President Trump. Once they get into financial crimes, and it's kind of interesting, you know, the financial crimes are so complicated, and that's what they actually took down the long-term pedophile who was the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, the longest-serving Speaker of the House for the GOP. They took him down not because of his pedophilia. As a matter of fact, he probably got that position. I'm sure he got that position because of his pedophilia. But they took him down with financial crimes because he withdrew his own money out of the bank. You know, of course, in a way, he was kind of hoisted by his own petard because he was it was under his leadership that they put those rules in. that are patently absurd. You know, it doesn't have anything to do with money laundering. They know once the money is in the bank, I mean, they could put in structuring if they wanted to put it under the pretense of controlling money laundering. They could do that when people are putting the money into the bank. But pulling the money out, why should that be an issue? You know, why should that be something? But that's what they took him down for. And one of the things, too, and you can talk about this with the film here, the pedophiles get away with this because they have such a short statute of limitations that once you find out about it, then they basically say, well, it's more than 2-3 years, so nothing can be done to these people about it. That's why they came after Hastert the way they did.
Well, it's amazing. You know, big government and through their mouthpieces in big media, they would make you think that it's absolutely necessary, that it is so complicated. That's the story they tell you, that you can't regulate the financial system simply, that you need hordes, tens of thousands of new SEC agents and all kinds of stuff just to regulate the financial sector. I'm here to tell you that they're wrong about that. And I'll give you a really simple example. You've heard of Bernie Madoff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That was the single biggest hedge fund fraud in history. And it happened right before President Obama and all the Democrats took power in 2008. Well, guess what? Bernie Madoff was something called a registered investment advisor. Okay. And that means there's a whole lot of rules and regulations and all that. Now, what that was designed for, it was back in the 1930s, and it was designed for people who were going to give financial advice to individuals. In other words, you come in and they tell you, okay, we're looking at your stuff and to plan for retirement and this and that, you should do this and the other thing. It's okay, you need to have a lot of certifications for all that. And you're dealing with mom and pops and so on and so forth. Well, even Bernie Madoff, when the SEC come to visit him every year for a few days, they still missed his fraud. You'd say, why? Very, very simple. Just like you and anybody else would keep their money in a bank account, a hedge fund manager keeps their stocks, their bonds, whatever they own, currencies, or whatever they're short. That's all kept at something called a prime brokerage, like a J.P. Morgan or a Goldman Sachs, in my case, Bank of America. It's just a term for a hedge fund's bank account, right? Mm-hmm. So if somebody is checking your books at the end of every year, your auditors and your accountants and all that, well, guess what? They call your prime broker and they get the documents and say, oh, yeah, okay, he's got what he really says he has in there. Very simple. And 99.9% of all hedge funds use a big Wall Street bank prime broker so that somebody can check their deposits as it were, right? Mm-hmm. Bernie Madoff was his own prime broker.
And they allowed that.
Absolutely. and not only that, so simple.
He has a couple of different hats.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So he could just make up whatever deposit sheets he wanted. So the simple way to regulate things when you find out there's a Bernie Madoff is the government should go around and say, wait a minute, here's what the 99% of honest people do just because they're honest in the industry. And we'll make that a rule. We'll codify best practices, right? Common sense that, hey, if you want to be a fund, you can't pretend that you're your own bank. You can't be your own prime broker. Mm-hmm. That's not what they did. Obama and his Democrat cronies passed a big Dodd-Frank, as you know, and among a lot of other things they whacked in the financial system was hedge funds. And they said, everybody now, even though hedge funds are just a toy for the rich to, you know, put in a pool and invest and hopefully make more money, they decided to jam the registered investment advisor thing on us.
Wow.
And now you
That's
don't
a story
have
that we haven't heard too much. We've heard what they did to the small banks, basically making it impossible for them to participate in mortgages and driving many of them out of business and making it very difficult for consumers to get loans. But I hadn't heard that about the hedge funds. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk to Gabe Hoffman. We're going to have a clip of the film Open Secrets, the story that Hollywood doesn't want you to see. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back.
Is that... I think every little kid dreams about being famous and being in movies.
This is California. This is where you make it. This is where it all starts.
You'll get signed by a label. You can star on Disney Channel. You know, what kid wouldn't want that, right?
I remember you asked me if I ever did anything with the guy before. I was not interested at 12.
You're not recording this, right?
Looks like an angel Hollywood doesn't have any system in place to protect anybody, and children are way down on that list.
Children need management just like everybody else.
Walk like an angel.
Everybody liked him.
He became part of the family.
In the beginning, it was happy, and then things started changing.
Oh, you talk like an angel.
They pick on people who they know will be victims.
You have an adult who is manipulating the child.
Just getting, hired on the spot like that. That had never happened before.
It was obvious that something was going on.
The party made me feel uncomfortable. There were lots of drugs available.
Listening to the trailer for Open Secret, and we're talking to the producer, Gabe Hoffman. And of course, Hollywood did not want this story told. That's one of the reasons that you need to see it, because even though they had given an Oscar nomination to the same director, Amy Berg, on the same subject about the same crime, pedophilia, when it was an exposure of the Catholic Church, when they did this film that was about the rampant pedophilia in Hollywood, Hollywood didn't want to distribute it, did they, Gabe?
No, Hollywood did everything they could at every step of the way to try to keep this film from the American people. And every step of the way we fought them, and now it's out there.
So the key thing that they did to oppose you, because you talked about the fact that they couldn't shut down your funding like they do for some people who crowdsource something. You had, as a hedge fund manager, somebody came to you and said, hey, there's this problem in Hollywood. And you know, oh, I don't know. I don't want to be a film producer. You weren't into being a Harvey Weinstein type of guy, right? So it's like, I don't want to become powerful and have starlets, falling at my feet or whatever. But you said, look, yeah, I'll do that as a philanthropist. And so you bankrolled it. They couldn't come after you financially because you had enough money that you could produce this film on your own, so they couldn't shut it down from that angle. What they did, though, was after you got the film done, they tried to block distribution, didn't they? Tell us what happened with that.
Every step of the way. So at a film festival, if you're just a couple college grads and you've got a $50,000 from friends and family, they'll let you in with your documentary, and you'll maybe be in the corner somewhere. You won't be on the main screen. So no less than 3 film festivals we got into, and then weeks later, when the higher-ups found out from the Hollywood bigwigs, we got kicked out. It was unprecedented.
Wow.
Of course, that didn't stop us. We took it to theaters anyway ourselves.
Yeah, and we've seen that happen as well with another controversial topic, vaccines. The vaxxed. Eventually, Robert De Niro said, yeah, I think we should. And then the filmmakers came out and said, no, we don't want that shown. Of course, there was pressure, we believe, from other people to shut that down. And that's the way that they do it. They get you kicked out of the film festivals, and that helps to keep you from getting any distribution. So that was in 2014, and then what happened?
So that was actually in 14 and then in 15. And by the way, the first festival we got into, Doc NYC, sold out on 2 days' notice, and it was on the front page of Drudge.
Wow.
So they just couldn't keep us down no matter what.
Well, it's a very sensational topic. And it's something that is really visceral. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people, talk to us about this, a lot of people might be squeamish to look at a film about this. It's like maybe there's something in their past where they've been a victim and they don't want to see what's going on. That's a big part of the problem, that people are very uncomfortable talking about it because it's such a heinous crime. And they don't want to, engage the subject. Tell us how you engage that sensitive subject.
Amy did an amazing job. There is no explicit language in the film describing anything that happened. Don't get me wrong, the things that we reveal in the film itself about the dark secrets of Hollywood, we expose a big-time child agent as a pedophile, and we show pedophiles that are convicted, that are still working in Hollywood. All that will really disturb you and what it does to these poor kids. But what you don't see is any sort of graphic description of any sort of the actual crimes themselves and the acts. Yeah. It's PG-13, but you'll see a lot worse stuff on network TV at about 9 o'clock at night.
So it's not something that's going to appeal to a pedophile, but it's something that people need to understand. And that's an important distinction. I mean, some people get very prurient in their depiction of things, which, that's good that you avoid that. But what we heard in that trailer, the guy saying, yeah, this guy shows up, he was hired on the spot. That never happens. That was kind of unusual. Another guy says, yeah, he pointed a gun at their face, and said, do this or that. I mean, that's the level of corruption. We're seeing this with Harveywood, okay, where they're taking all the sins of Hollywood and they're putting them on this one scapegoat that they're going to send over the cliff or whatever, right? And then that's going to basically exonerate them from all this. But this is something that is far more pervasive, I should say, and far more perverse that's going on in Hollywood that hasn't even been exposed yet, that's talked about in your documentary, Open Secret.
You've even had A-listers come out just in the last couple of days and talk about what happened to them. Even folks like Jennifer Lawrence when she was 15 years old, and so on and so forth. And there's been about 10 like. And
it was a year and a half ago that we had the tweet out there by Elijah Wood, which I believe was, he came back and said, well, I was basing it on seeing the film Open Secret or whatever. But we've got others who have talked about this, and Corey Feldman was talking about what happened to his a really good friend Corey Haim, and that all started coming out about the same time as your film was coming out, but everybody kind of tamped that down. They said, no, we're not going to listen to Corey Feldman, and we're not going to let your film get distributed.
And we went to the highest journalistic standards in an Open Secret. The big Hollywood people that we exposed didn't have a dang thing on us. We never got sued. We never even got a credible threat of suit. And by the way, there's Hollywood bigwigs that are in there that we didn't even know about. But when we got threatened, we said, okay, we'll go and tag them. You ever seen the film Grease?
Oh, yeah.
Of course. So the director, Randall Kleiser, well, 20 years later, I guess his career took a tumble, and he was a director for some of this pedophile ring den's little web shows. So he's hanging around with all these pedophiles. Well, his attorney, Michael Donaldson, the biggest, Hollywood sort of firm out there, sent us something really threatening saying, well, he's, in there for 5 seconds. We didn't even know he was in there. So we wrote him back and said, hey, go pound sand. Now we're going to put a tag on him so everybody knows.
That's great. That's great. So talk about some of the people in just the last week or so, besides Jennifer Lawrence, that have come out talking about this, because I think that there's going to be either one or two ways that this is going to roll. Either they're going to try to just confine it around Harvey and just, the Weinstein group, maybe his brother too, they're going to drag into it now because that started going back and forth. But maybe they're going to get a little bit more broad on this. Maybe it will get to some of the people, like you said, like Jennifer Lawrence, who they came after when she was just 15 years old.
Or Reese Witherspoon when she was 16, who was courageous enough to talk this week. Or Michaela Maroney, who was part of the Fierce Five that won the gold medal for the U.S. women's gymnastics team. This goes deep and this goes broad through all aspects of entertainment. And you're going to hear about this from not just, when you think Hollywood, it's not just film, it's music, it's theater, it's sports, it's all over the place. And you're seeing the dam breaking now. These big, powerful people, they can't hold it back anymore. And that's part of why we put this out there to the public. You know that over 1 million views just in the week that we made this free?
Wow.
I mean, these powerful Hollywood people are opening up their Twitter feeds, and I kid you not, thousands and thousands and thousands of people calling them out by name, hitting them with their @ symbols right to their face.
Wow. And where's it free?
It's free on Vimeo. You can get at that at our Twitter @AnOpenSecret.
Great, right. One of the things, too, going back and tying this to Harvey Weinstein, when this all started breaking, I went back and found an op-ed piece that he had written in support of Roman Polanski, of all people, right? And, he said his so-called crime, he's paid his dues for his so-called crime. I mean, that was the words of Harvey Weinstein. And this was the rape of an underage girl.
Drugging.
And let him come back. And the reason that he gave was because Roman Polanski is true to his art. That's the excuse.
Drugging and raping a 13-year-old girl is a supposed crime for which he was convicted in a U.S. court and then fled the country. And then he gets awards at those big, Hollywood things. And it's so funny how they all stand up and clap to an empty screen because he's not allowed back in the country to receive it in person.
Yeah. His so-called crime. That's amazing. That's amazing. But, of course, it's really about the power. And that's why these people hang out with Hollywood. Can you stay with us one more segment?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to be right back. We're going to be talking more to Gabe Hoffman. He is the producer of Open Secret. A very important film for you to see, and it's going to be free till October the 22nd. So we're going to talk to him about that more in the next segment. I'm David. We're here with Gabe Hoffman. He is the producer of An Open Secret. And make sure you get that. It's not Open Secret, but An Open Secret. Very important film. We had a controversy about 1.5 years ago We had reviving the controversy surrounding Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. You know, Corey Feldman is now in his 40s. Had come out and said, talked about his friend, Corey Haim, who's now dead. He was raped at the age of 11 by a man. And so Corey Feldman was talking about that. And then we had, and he took some heat for that. And then we had Elijah Wood start tweeting about it and saying that, you know, it's amazing what is going on in Hollywood. I would love to love names, so forth. And then when they started coming down on him hard, he goes, well, I was talking about this documentary film, An Open Secret. And so we have the producer of that film here with us now, Gabe Hoffman. And you did a great job in terms of exposing this thing that Hollywood does not want to be exposed. As I pointed out before, same director, same crimes, if it's okay, and they'll nominate her for an Oscar if she talks about these crimes in the Catholic Church, but don't talk about it in Hollywood. They did everything they could to shut you down in the film festivals, but once you got into one of them, it exploded. Drudge covered it. We had Elijah Woods talking about it. But you know, when they try to cover this up, you know, now Corey Haim is not there to talk about it, is he?
He isn't. And so many victims of child sex abuse in Hollywood, former child stars, turn to drugs and alcohol to try to drown their pain. Some even commit suicide. But there are literally hundreds that are not anywhere near as famous who are no longer here to tell their tale. And that's why folks like Corey Feldman or films like An Open Secret are so important. You know, there's a stereotype out there that if you're a former child star and you got sexually abused, there must be something wrong with you and your family. When you watch our film, An Open Secret, our 5 brave survivors, you see they're from good, all-American homes. Parents did the right thing, so on and so forth. But these pedophiles are good. They get close, and they pull it off anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they know how to get what they want. You know, one of the things that Elijah Wood said, he pulled back and he goes, well, my mom knew about that, and she made sure that I didn't go to any of those parties, and she watched them like very, very closely. But in your trailers, you're pointing out, there's this seductive thing about offering access to fame and money and all these other things. All these people, oh, yeah, I can get on the Disney Channel. Yeah, I could turn out like I could turn out like Miley Cyrus. I mean, who would not want that for their kids, right?
Well, I don't know about Miley Cyrus, but
so that's the thing. Maybe people could start to learn from that. But you know, it's also the juncture of politics in Hollywood, as we've seen in the UK, as we saw with Jimmy Savile. Okay. Or Savile, I think is the way they pronounce it there, like Savile Row. Anyway, he is an entertainer who gets heavily involved with the politicians and so forth, just like Harvey Weinstein, okay? And there's a reason for that, because it's all about the power. These guys have immense power over people's lives because of that lure of fame, that lure of money. And so that power in and of itself is a kind of drug, isn't it, that draws them into politics, those same types of people.
Absolutely. I mean, Jimmy Savile famously went to Margaret Thatcher's annual holiday party for something like 10 years in a row. He was Bill Cosby, probably cubed. He would even commit pedophilia on children that he was visiting in the hospital. They only found this out after he died, but there were literally hundreds of victims. And I'll tell you what, the UK is way ahead of the US in addressing this problem. Did you know there's something called the Savile effect?
No.
So what that means, and it's been shown by...
You know what? Let's hang on, because we got to take a break in about 25 seconds here, and we'll get into that if you can stay with us into the next segment, because I'm sure the audience would like to hear about the Savile effect, and it's not about bespoke clothing. It's about keeping things secret. And, of course, there were numerous investigations that began at Scotland Yard that were shut down by the people higher up. There was a documentary that was being done on him in the BBC, and the higher-ups there shut it down as well. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back with Gabe Hoffman. Stay with us. We're here with Gabe Hoffman, producer of An Open Secret, exposing pedophilia in Hollywood. And, of course, it's something that, as we see with Harvey Weinstein, there's a juncture between the entertainment industry and politics, and that also existed in the UK. The person who embodied that probably the most there was Jimmy Savile, and or Savile, we should say. That's I keep going back to the American pronunciation of it. But he was just talking about the effect that this exposure of his crimes had in the UK. Tell us about that effect, Gabe.
Sure. You can Google it, Savile effect. So what happened is, this was a few years ago. The UK took this very seriously. They started exposing it. I mean, Jimmy Savile had a weekly variety program on the BBC, which was like all 3 networks combined in the UK, huge for decades and decades and decades. There's almost nobody bigger. So he dies. This all comes out. Huge shock. Society starts taking this seriously. And what you saw is 2 things happen. First, the reports of prior rape, sexual assaults, and all that across general society, as measured by their own crime stats, went up something like 100, 200, 300%, measured by Scotland Yard and others. Then, a couple years later, the incidence of new rapes, sexual assaults, and other things started going down by double digits. So what I'm trying to say in conclusion to this is, look, this is happening in Hollywood, and we're a little part of what's exposing it now here on InfoWars. But you know what? By getting it out there, talking about it, and bringing down these big, powerful Hollywood pedophiles, give it a couple years, and it's going to affect your life and American society in a positive way.
Yes, that's very important. So the effect is that you have these high-profile, very powerful people. They get brought down, and then the people who are lower down say, hey, you know, even these big guys are getting exposed, and they're not getting a pass on it. So they're definitely going to come for me, okay? So they do come for them. So you see an initial rise, and then it starts to diminish as they get these predators convicted. Other people are scared off from the predation. So maybe in the U.S. we'll have an open secret effect.
Exactly. If you see somebody as courageous that's going after a Harvey Weinstein and they're successful, if you're somebody out there who's not famous and it's, heaven forbid, a family member, coach, whatever, all of a sudden you see that, you're inspired, and you're not as afraid to bring them down.
And of course, you know, when we look at Harvey Weinstein, when we look at Jimmy Savile, then we understand that they're kind of a bridge. And there's a lot of this stuff that is going on that is in Washington, D.C., that is in Westminster in the UK, right? We saw that with Heath. It came out, the former Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath, came out, all the accusers now that are surfacing, accusing him of pedophilia and things even worse, murders and so forth that are coming out. And so it's gotten so bad that people in the UK have said, we're going to have to stop naming buildings after individuals. We're going to just have to name them after things or events or something in the streets, because now they're having to go back and it's an embarrassment to have all these streets that were named after Heath because this is happening. And we've had Cynthia McKinney, who was former congresswoman, and she said, in referencing your movie as well, she said, well, you know, it's Hollywood now, but it's going to go to Washington, D.C., because we know that this is all about power. And as much power as people like Harvey Weinstein have, there's even more power by the people who are in Washington, D.C. That is the reason that they exist, is to exercise that power.
Absolutely. Big government exists to grow even larger and larger and have ever-increasing amounts of control over our lives. And Hollywood is losing its grip on having its control over what we watch and what we use for entertainment.
And there's something about these people that, you know, while everybody else looks at this and says, you know, this is just incredibly sick, for them, victimizing young children gives them a sense of power and domination. That's the strange thing about it, isn't it?
It's a complicated power dynamic. Yeah. And it's important for InfoWars viewers to understand that this same power dynamic of being away from home where you're safe, where your parents can protect you, being away for long hours, be it a soccer travel team or whatever the case may be, you're vulnerable all of a sudden. So it's not just about bringing down Hollywood. Our film, An Open Secret, you'll see, and in some cases, the home videos, if you pay close attention, of how the pedophiles were doing the grooming process. You'll pick up tips to figure out how to spot a grooming process if it's happening in your town or your neighborhood or, heaven forbid, your own living room.
Yeah, that's the important thing, because a normal person can't get into the mindset of somebody who would do something like this. And you're saying that by watching this and hearing the experiences of other people, you will get an insight into their MO, their method of operation. so that you can set up some guards about that. That's the biggest problem with all of this stuff. When we talk about this stuff to people, we talk about so many things that the elites are doing. Pedophilia is one of those. And people will look at it and go, I can't believe that would happen. Why would anybody do that? That's just absolutely insane. And so a normal person can't understand why certain things that are being done by the powerful elite, and pedophilia is just one of them. They can't understand why this would happen because it's just so far outside of the possibility of anything that they would ever want to do or even consider to do. And so that's the key thing, is to understand what their tactics are and their techniques, and hearing that testimony from somebody who's been victimized by it, so that you're inoculated against it or warned about the way that they operate.
And on an open secret, just like in Deliver Us from Evil, we get you into the minds of the pedophiles in their own words. You get to hear what their justifications are. You get to learn their tactics and all that, so that, yeah, you can spot them. If heaven forbid there's one in your community, you're going to have a much better shot at making sure that they don't hurt more kids than they already have.
Yeah, and you referenced Deliver Us from Evil. That was the director of An Open Secret, Amy Berg. That was the film that she did about pedophile abuse in the Catholic Church, Deliver Us from Evil. And that was widely acclaimed in Hollywood. So then she wanted to do one about, well, it's also happening not just in Catholic Church, but it's also happening in Hollywood. That's when they want to try to shut that down, try to censor it. Same director, same crime, but different group of people.
The American people are clearly on our side. In 1 week, something on the internet that just started with us saying in our Twitter feed, over 1 million views. The response has been truly incredible. So we know the American people are getting on our side against Hollywood because, hey, the facts are out there, and Hollywood can't control. You know, they can control the distribution. They can control financing in a lot of cases, except for us. They can control whether it goes on video on demand or whatever, you know, the Amazons and the Netflix, and, you know, they can control that, but they can't control the internet, and ultimately Hollywood can't control you.
I know that you put it out for a short period of time for free on Vimeo. Did you ever get distribution with Netflix and Amazon anyway?
None yet, and at this point, we don't need them, and we don't care, because the American people are rising up to take down these powerful Hollywood pedophiles.
But I think it's important for people to understand that they refuse to distribute this film. At the same time that we have the takedown of the guy who was head of the film unit at Amazon, right? For all these
maybe that
had something to do with it. So yeah,
it's funny. There's always reasons behind these things, and sometimes you get really lucky and you find out what they are sooner, like the Amazon guy, and others maybe you don't find out till later, but I'm sure you will.
Yeah, that's very important for people to understand where they are in this entire thing. So you've got this on for free at Vimeo as well. And do you have any, I don't want to get you killed, but do you have any plans on going after DC? if you say that, those people will kill you. They won't just shut off your distribution.
I'm just a simple hedge fund manager. This has been a very nice philanthropic project. And the reality is that everybody was afraid of Hollywood, and once we expose Hollywood, and it's being exposed by the American people, they won't be afraid to take down DC either themselves.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Gabe Hoffman. And again, the film is An Open Secret. And we really do thank you for your service in terms of financing this. It really is a philanthropic endeavor here to expose this truth. And you're going to be on later with Alex Jones, and you've got a special announcement with Alex Jones. So stay tuned.